So as a lot of you already know, a lot of the critics over at Rotten Tomatoes, they don't really like horror movies all that much. So today I'm going to go through how Rotten Tomatoes ranks 15 summer horror movies and whether or not I agree with it. So a lot of you already know how Rotten Tomatoes scores their movies, but if you don't, so when at least 60% of the reviews for a movie are positive, you'll see the red tomato, which indicates that that movie is fresh. When less than 60% of the reviews for a movie are positive, then you'll see a green splatter mark. Also, if the tomato meter score is above 75%, then that means the movie is certified fresh. So out of these 15 movies, there's actually only one movie on this list which is not fresh, not at least fresh. And also just a reminder, so this will be ranked based off the lowest tomato meter score to the highest tomato meter score. All right, so before we get into the ranking, let me tell you which 15 summer horror movies are going to be on this list. So we've got Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, The Hills Have Eyes from 1977, Fear Street 2, Piranha from 1978, Dawn of the Dead 2004, Friday the 13th from 1980, the original, The Burning from 1981, Tremors, the first one from 1990, Sleepaway Camp from 1983, the original, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Jaws, X, Midsommar, The Lost Boys, and The Blair Witch Project. All right, starting us off at number 15, and in last place is going to be I Know What You Did Last Summer, which was released in 1997 with a 45% tomato meter score and a 41% audience score. So the critics' consensus for this one is a by-the-numbers slasher that arrived a decade too late. The mostly tedious I Know What You Did Last Summer will likely only hook diehard fans of the genre. I mean, I would disagree with some of that, of course, but yeah, is it a by-the-numbers slasher? Yeah, definitely, in a lot of ways, of course, but I mean, I like this movie a lot. Is it mostly tedious to me? No, I wouldn't say that. Will it only kind of hook diehard fans of the genre? No, I wouldn't say that, because I think with the cast and how popular the cast members are, that definitely brings in people who, you know, are not a fan of slashers, kind of similar to sort of what Scream did. Of course, this is a Scream-inspired slasher and whatnot, but because it's in last place, you know what we like to do? We like to go through some of the critic reviews as well to kind of see what they say. Let's start off with this one. So the first critic rated this movie as rotten, gave it a 2.5 out of 5, and said the payoff is less effective. It involves several teen Scream modules, such as the $1.98 startle effect, the hand on the shoulder, and the is he dead yet gambit. I mean, yes, it does, and I'm here for it. You know what I mean? Yes, of course, it's got some of those cheesy aspects to it, but you know, I'm not mad at it. I still enjoy that part of it, right? All right, let's go through two more really quick as well, because this one's in last place. You know, we might as well. The next critic said they said it was rotten. They gave it a 1 out of 5. They said it was stupid. What if you're 14? You may love it. What if you're 38 and you still love it? Okay, anyways, moving on. The next critics said it was fresh, and the story has more holes than bodies do, but the shocks are efficient, and Party of Five's Jennifer Love Hewitt knows how to scream with soul. Yeah, Jennifer Love Hewitt definitely has a great scream. I think she's incredible in horror movies. Both this movie and the sequel, really enjoy her in those movies. I wish we would have seen more of her in the genre, especially at that time. You know, I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, I think they're going to come out with another one of these, I think next year or the year after that. And apparently she's probably going to be in it, so I'm excited for that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think the shocks are efficient. This movie is just one of those like paint by numbers slashers, though, that is just fun. It's just a good time. You know, it's got the cast that, you know, if you grew up in this time, you know, if you were like a teenager or approaching teenage years, you knew everybody in this cast very well. And, you know, they play off of each other, I think, well. You've got like the rich kid, you've got like the more blue collar kid who's trying to fit in with them, the rich girl who's kind of bratty, Jennifer Love Hewitt's character who's kind of a mix of some of them, but also just like good to her core, and a character you really root for in the story, you know what I'm saying? And just does a great job. But I like the kills in this movie. The killer with the slicker outfit with the hook, amazing. I love that. I love the setting for this movie, you know, this coastal town. It's just a great setting. It's just a hell of a lot of fun. one of the best like 4th of July type of slashers, and one of the best like summer slashers for me. I just really, really enjoy this movie a lot. Would I have this movie last on this list? No, hell no. There's definitely some movies on this list that I would have behind I Know What You Did Last Summer, without a doubt. Not because necessarily this movie's just technically better. Yeah, like I said, the sound design and the way the movie looks is great, but it's like, which movies do I have the most fun with? And I Know What You Did Last Summer, compared to the other movies on this list, definitely not last for me. Would I rate it a 45%? Hell no. There's no way. I love this movie, definitely. So I would disagree, Rotten Tomatoes. All right, enough with I Know What You Did Last Summer. So coming up next at number 14 is going to be Friday the 13th from 1980, the original. So now we're starting to get into the movies that are fresh. And this movie's rated way higher than I Know What You Did Last Summer. There's a big gap here. So we're going from 45% to a 66% tomato meter score and a 60% audience score. So the critics' consensus for the original Friday the 13th is rather quaint by today's standards. Friday the 13th still has its share of bloody surprises and a 70s holdover aesthetic to slightly compel. And I've talked about this before. I definitely agree with that. I love the slasher movies that are early 80s, late 70s, because of course the ones in the 70s, you have that 70s aesthetic, and then the ones in the 80s, you get some of that 80s aesthetic to it, but also like that holdover, like they said, from the 70s aesthetic, some of those colors and just like the acting and the style of it and the grittiness of the movie. I'm a sucker for that. The original Friday the 13th, I know, not everybody's cup of tea. I have, how Rotten Tomatoes ranks the Friday the 13th franchise. You guys can go check that out on my channel. And the comments about Friday the 13th, the original, are all over the place. You will always see that. There's a lot of people who think this is one of the most boring movies in the franchise. For me, though, I love this movie. I love the whodunit aspect of it. I know Pamela Voorhees, we don't get introduced to her until later in the movie. I get that kind of flaw, I guess you could say, with it. But Pamela Voorhees is one of my favorite horror villains ever. I love the reveal at the end. I love the fight at the end. I love how sinister she is. Her motive is like so primal in so many ways, which is amazing. It's a mother whose kid was killed, essentially. She's just on a revenge tour, trying to go nuts. And she has literally gone nuts. Love that aspect to it. You got Kevin Bacon in the movie. You've got Tom Savini doing the effects on the original Friday the 13th, which are fun. The kills are overall just a great time. But as far as like a summer horror movie goes, this is one of the coziest summer horror movies you will ever watch. The original Friday the 13th, it just gives you those like summer camp cozy vibes without a doubt. You know what I'm saying? So would I have Friday the 13th, the original, second to last on this list compared to these other movies? Nope, I wouldn't. Similar to the movie we just talked about a second ago, I would have this higher for me because I actually really love this movie. And it's just a damn good summer horror movie, in my opinion. So there you go. Friday the 13th, 1980 at number 14. So really quickly, I just want to give a shout out and a thank you to the newest Tier 3 patron, Aaron, for early access to videos, commentary tracks to play alongside your favorite movies, movie watch-along parties with me, and so many other things. Head over to Patreon, where you can join for as little as $1 a month and help support the Madhouse. The link is in the description. All right, I'll shut up now, and we'll get back to the video. All right, up next at number 13 is going to be The Hills Have Eyes from 1977, which was fresh at a 67% in the tomato meter score, 54% audience score. So the critics' consensus goes like this. When it's not bludgeoning the viewer with its more off-putting, cruder elements, The Hills Have Eyes wields some clever storytelling and a sly sense of dark humor. So I'll be honest, I'm not really that big of a fan of this movie in a lot of ways, and I'm not unfamiliar with horror movies in the 70s. There's a lot of horror movies in the 70s that I really like. So it's not necessarily because this movie is old and doesn't yet fit into that aesthetic or that look or the kind of like modernization of horror that we see like with some of the innovations in the genre in the 80s and etc. and so on. This movie just, I just think, you know, it's just very, very slow, and there's not a lot of payoff in this movie to me. You know, even the fucked up people who are living off in the hills, they kind of just look like characters who are playing dress up. It doesn't look that believable to me. There's really not a lot of tension in this movie at all. And I get there's like a humor approach to this movie. But there's also a lot of things in this movie that are just blatantly ripped off of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre in a lot of ways. This was Wes Craven's second, feature film. Yeah, I'm a huge Wes Craven fan. We'll talk about Wes more. And I've talked about Wes a ton on this channel. Yeah, I love what he does. But this movie is definitely not one of his best movies for me. There's some moments like when the baby gets taken, the way the people react is just not really that believable and just silly. I mean, I guess, of course, that plays into the whole funny thing, whether intentional or not intentional, the humor and whatnot. But I just think this movie's slow. There's not a lot going on. Is it terrible? No. But do I have a problem with this movie being number 13 on this list? No, I would definitely have The Hills Have Eyes from 1977 as one of the worst movies on this list for me personally. I get the some of the unique aspects to it, and I get how at the time in the late 70s there were probably some things in this movie that were pretty damn scary. Of course, it's 2024, so a lot of things in this movie kind of used to seeing in a lot of ways. But The Hills Have Eyes. Yeah, it's just not that great to me, and I agree with it being towards the later end of this list without a doubt. So, all right, so moving right along to number 12 is going to be Piranha from 1978 with 72% on the tomato meter score and a 51% audience score. The critics' consensus for Piranha goes like this: performed with a wink and directed with weary self-awareness, Piranha is an unabashed B-movie with satirical bite. So yeah, Piranha's a good time. I had a good time with this movie. It's definitely one of those early B movies, one of the first movies clearly inspired by Jaws. There's so many shots of this movie that are like Jaws, but obviously like on a smaller scale because it's piranhas instead of some giant ass shark, right? But this movie has great summer vibes. It's gonna immediately just remind you of like being out boating in the summer or hanging out at the river with your friends or family right away. This movie's definitely got a lot of, there's just some crazy stuff in this movie. So these piranhas were essentially like created by the army to be used in Vietnam, up the rivers, I guess, in Vietnam to kill some people and whatnot. So you got that hilarious like side story to it and everything like that. I actually like the piranha kills in this movie. I think they're fun. I think they're shot well. I think they hide. They kind of knew their limitations with this movie and hide the piranhas enough, kind of similar to Jaws, and do a good job of like showing them in certain, like shadows and certain close-ups and whatnot to make it believable, in my opinion. It definitely has a lot of that late 70s charm, which I talked about a little bit earlier, which I love. Yeah, the characters in this movie are not great, though. There's really not a single character in this movie that kind of jumps off the screen and is somebody who's really memorable that you want to see in like another horror movie or really just like seeing a sequel or anything like that. So none of the characters really pop off the screen at all. I do think in this movie, the middle of the movie spends way too much time with the campers and the people in town. We don't get enough piranha killing in the middle of the movie, in my opinion. So it kind of drags in the middle, definitely. But yeah, the summer camp scene with the kids, damn. They just let kids get slaughtered left and right in that scene. And I was a little bit surprised. I get it. This movie's from 1978, but still, there were some moments where I was like, oh, holy shit. There's also some really funny moments in this movie, like, for example, when one of the assistants for the guy who's opening up this resort, clearly inspired by the mayor from Jaws, and his assistant is like, hey, sir, they're eating the guests, sir. Moments like that are pretty funny. That guy's really sleazy. He's trying to put off, like what potentially could happen, like the mayor in Jaws. And there's some funny one-liners and just some funny scenes too. If you like kind of look for the humor in this movie. And then towards the end of the movie, you also get kind of that big moment with like the ski boat and the pyrotechnics. It flies over like this ramp and there's this big explosion. You're like, oh, damn. They sunk a little bit of the budget into that, which is a good time. But yeah, Piranha from 1978. Do I have a problem with this movie being number 12 on the list? No, I do think this movie, I had a better time than like The Hills Have Eyes with this movie. And, it's actually probably a decent spot for it. Right around 10, 11, 12. I think it's a good spot for me on this list. So there you go. Piranha from 1978 at number 12. All right, up next at number 11 is going to be Dawn of the Dead from 2004, which was actually certified fresh. So it's over 75%. This movie comes in at 76% on the tomato meter, 77% audience score. So the critics' consensus for this movie goes like this: a kinetic, violent, and surprisingly worthy remake of George Romero's horror classic that pays homage to the original while working on its own terms. I have a good time with this movie. I mean, I love the subgenres, the whole like post-apocalyptic zombie subgenre. Big fan of it. Big fan of Dawn of the Dead. This movie's a good time. It immediately just transports you to the early 2000s. It just has that look, that feel. Obviously, the actors immediately remind you of kind of that era, but it's fun. You got characters that are clearly supposed to be like the jackass assholes who you want to see get killed. You have characters who you root for in the story. I think the zombies look good. I think the mall is fun, especially in 2024, where we're starting to see like a lot of abandoned malls. You're like, oh damn, that kind of looks like malls right now, which is kind of funny. But yeah, there's some moments where you're also like, what are you doing? That is the stupidest decision you could possibly do. But it just adds to the fun. I think the ending is a good time. But with this movie, the part that I always remember is definitely the opening to the movie. How everything kind of unfolds and our main character gets to just basically, they don't learn on the news that shit's going down. They just learn it firsthand because like their daughter and then eventually their husband is attacking them, and they're just like, what is happening? I got to get the hell out of here. And we're just following them on this journey to learn what's going on through their POV. Like I said, not through the news, not through the papers, not through a friend telling them, just through their own eyes. So yeah, Dawn of the Dead from 2004 is a good time. Would I have this movie right around number 11? I probably, it would be right around that 9, 10, 11 range for me, just because I think on this list, there's some other movies I like more, but this is a pretty solid list, I'm not gonna lie. So Dawn of the Dead, very solid zombie movie, especially if you have some of that nostalgia for the early 2000s. So there you go, number 11, Dawn of the Dead from 2004. All right, up next at number 10 and number 9 is actually gonna be a tie. So we've got The Lost Boys from 1987 tied with The Burning from 1981. So let's start off by talking about The Lost Boys, which was certified fresh at 77% in the tomato meter score and 85% audience score. So the audience loves this movie. Cult classic without a doubt. But yeah, the critics' consensus for The Lost Boys goes like this: flawed, but eminently watchable. Joel Schumacher's teen vampire thriller blends horror, humor, and plenty of visual style with standout performances from a cast full of young 1980s stars. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, this cast for The Lost Boys is incredible, and obviously one of the biggest reasons why this movie is so beloved all these years later. I mean, you got the two Coreys in the movie, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman. Obviously, Jason Patric is in the movie, who, immediately is just like, holy shit, that guy is a star. And then, of course, Kiefer Sutherland in the movie, too. Like, the cast is insane going back and watching this movie. But this is one of those movies that feels as 80s of a movie as you can possibly imagine. It's kind of funny, like nowadays, I feel like there's a lot of teenagers who are starting to dress like these guys now. And, I'm not mad at it. Kind of cool with like the earring going on and the hair going on and all that. But this movie is just like 80s coolness, badass. It's just like 80s style, 80s music. It's got like, it's almost like a sexy, like supposed to have like almost like this sexual vampire kind of a vibe to the movie. Fun kills. I mean, I'm a sucker for this movie in a lot of ways, and a personal reason for me is because it was filmed in Santa Cruz. And I grew up going to Santa Cruz a lot, going to the boardwalk a lot as a kid, grew up a couple hours from it. So right away, this movie kind of like hits home for me. It reminds me of summer, the boardwalk, riding rides, having a good time. The Lost Boys is just a cult classic. It's a great time. Would I have The Lost Boys as number 9, number 10 on this list? I'd probably have it a little bit higher for me, probably like right around that maybe like 7 range, just because personally I really love this movie and I like it a little bit more than some of the other ones. Like I said though, this list is solid, so there's some movies on this list that could be, they could be like number 2 for me one week, and then they could be like number 8 one week, just because they're so close. But yeah, Lost Boys, great movie, really a lot of fun, but crazy. So it's tied with The Burning, which is very unexpected for me because I feel like The Lost Boys is a movie that like more people would enjoy, you know, instead of like a very niche audience in a sense. Whereas The Burning, I feel like is a little bit, I mean, definitely more of a niche cult slasher movie that maybe when you're not, you know, like within the whole horror community, you probably have never heard about. But yeah, The Burning from 1981, one of my favorite slasher movies ever made. Gives you great summer camp vibes. Of course, we already talked about summer camp stuff with Friday the 13th, but great cast in this. One of the best casts you'll ever see in a slasher movie, especially from the early 80s. Just a great cast across the board. Fun characters, a lot of good humor in it. A big cast too. It's not like one of those movies where it's like they only kind of, you know, spent some time casting like 2, maybe 3 actors. No, it's a pretty big cast and a lot of the characters get a lot of time. But yeah, so The Burning, did I not say the tomato meter score? This one was 77% and a 60% audience score. So big difference there. So The Lost Boys, 85%. This one was 60%. So yeah, that kind of indicates what I was talking about, how The Lost Boys kind of translates better to a wider audience. Whereas the critics kind of have it neck and neck with The Burning and The Lost Boys. That makes sense. Yeah. So The Burning actually has no critics consensus for this one. So I'm actually going to read a couple critic reviews for this one. The first one was fresh, but it was only 2.5 out of 5. That's kind of weird. They still said it was fresh. All right. But they said, it's a movie very much like Tolkien's writing. If you don't discover it in junior high, you'll never appreciate it the way it was meant to be appreciated again. Okay. I never thought in a million years The Burning and Tolkien would be, you know, even brought up in the same sentence, but there you go, guys. There you go. Kind of a weird critic comment there, but hey, you know, that's how he feels. Cool. Yeah. I discovered The Burning way after junior high, many years after, and I love The Burning, so I mean, I would disagree with that, but the next critic said it was rotten, and they said, at a time when the subgenre was undergoing a boom and the market was saturated, The Burning does little to distinguish itself from the spate of other slashers with which it was vying for screen space. And I get what they're saying there. I mean, yes, of course, there was a huge boom because of Friday the 13th after Halloween and whatnot. Definitely because of Friday the 13th in this kind of summer camp slasher bloody vibe. And yeah, there's some things here that definitely don't distinguish itself from like the rest of the genre as it was kind of booming and slashers were being pumped out left and right. But I mean, with this movie, you have Tom Savini, the legend, the special effects god, Tom Savini, working on this movie. He turned down Friday the 13th Part 2 to work on this movie. So the kills in this movie and the effects in this movie are incredible. Very well done, of course, like the canoe scene. Everybody thinks about that scene and remembers that scene. That's amazing. But I also think Cropsey as the villain is just cool as hell. Yes, I do think one of the areas where this movie misses is I think if they came up with kind of a little bit more of an interesting look to Cropsey, I'm not saying I hate the look of Cropsey, but a more interesting look, of course, like if they did the whole mask thing, that does probably increase your chances of having some sequels. But, you know, just a guy with like a burnt face, it looks great, but still, you know, probably could have done something probably a little bit more memorable with that. I love how at the end of this movie, though, it definitely is like building and building and building and building towards the end. And the big fight scene, there's still a lot of people alive. Of course, a lot of people have been slaughtered, but the big fight scene, like the final guy is kind of unique in the genre in this movie. He's a likable guy. And then you also do kind of have a final girl as well, but that's fun. The ending's just a good time, definitely. Yeah, I mean, this movie came out right about the same time as the second Friday the 13th movie. A lot of things that hurt this movie have to do with the timing of this movie, without a doubt. You know, like Friday the 13th Part 2 being so similar, especially the campfire scene. I mean, it's like almost verbatim. So that doesn't help this movie be unique in a lot of different ways. But The Burning, one of the greatest, especially 80s slasher movies ever made, without a doubt. If you have not seen The Burning, definitely recommend it. It is great summer camp vibes, without a doubt. So there you go. The Burning tied with The Lost Boys at number 10 and number 9. All right, up next at number 8 is going to be Sleepaway Camp from 1983 with an 81% tomato meter score and a 61% audience score. So the critics' consensus for this one goes like this. Sleepaway Camp is a standard teen slasher elevated by occasional moments of John Waters-esque weirdness and a twisted ending. Yeah, the ending is definitely a twist, no doubt. Because Sleepaway Camp is so out there, and there's so many moments in this movie that are moments where you either are going to immediately hate the movie or love it. Let's read some reviews. 2 of them. Let's do it. So, for Sleepaway Camp, this critic said it was fresh, gave it a 3.5 out of 5, and they said, while the film will forever be remembered for its shocker of an ending, there's still an interesting conversation going on about the effects of bullying and abuse on a child that allows the film to rise above some of its more shallow slasher peers. So, yeah, I mean, you can make an argument for that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a little too deep for Sleepaway Camp from 1983. I mean, I think you might be giving him a little bit too much credit for making a movie that's deep. You know what I mean? So, all right, one more critic review for Sleepaway Camp. So they said it was rotten. They gave it a 2 out of 4, and they said, evokes a period in time before Ritalin and common sense. Okay, so Sleepaway Camp. I'm always down for like an 80s summer camp whodunit slasher. I mean, that is my thing. This movie is that. I mean, of course, this movie just has so many moments, like I said a second ago, you're just like, what is happening? The aunt in the movie is just, like, you don't even know what's going on with her. Like, what is happening? Why does she talk so weird? What's going on here? Of course, you've got the opening to the movie where the tragedy happens and then everything kind of unfolds and we transport, years later after that. We're at this summer camp. You've got the guy who's the cook. Of course, he's just like the worst human on the planet. So that's one of those moments right away. When you meet that guy, you're like, okay, I'm either going to have to turn this movie off. You're either going to be that type of person, or you buckle up for this ride and you kind of take it for what it is. I mean, this movie is pure just 80s summer camp cheese. So many 80s one-liners in this movie, like a real carpenter's dream, that line. You've got the whole like eat shit and live line. You've got also some great kills in this movie. I'm not gonna lie, I have some good times with the kills. Some people think the kills are terrible. I think they're fun. I mean, the bee kill, yes, very unbelievable in a lot of ways, but still like a very gruesome and brutal kill. And of course, I mean, damn, the curling iron kill. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. The curling iron kill between you know what I mean. You know what I'm getting at here. Crazy. I mean, that is Sleepaway Camp. And of course, the ending to Sleepaway Camp, the most memorable aspect of this movie, without a doubt. And still, I mean, 41 years later, still an ending that is got to remain on like one of the most shocking endings in horror history. Also, like, really damn creepy. And it just added to that because, I mean, the fact that it ended up being like a guy at the end and he was just wearing Angela's mask, like a face of her, which kind of looks like her, but in like a weird, like definitely like super creepy way. But just what an ending. Yeah, I mean, this is just pure 80s cheese. Would I have Sleepaway Camp as number 8 for me? For me personally, I mean, the audience score is probably a little closer to what I would kind of feel with Sleepaway Camp, 61%. I mean, clearly you can see like, okay, The Lost Boys had an audience score in the 80s. This movie's in the 60% range. Not surprising there. I do have a good time with Sleepaway Camp. You kind of have to be in the mood for this movie. It's not like, for me, it's not one of those slashers I could put on any time and have a good time with. If I'm in the mood for it, I'm going to have a good time with it. Like I said, the kills, the ending, the twists, the fact that they just kind of went out on a limb with this one. I appreciate that. I respect it. So, yeah, there you go. Sleepaway Camp, number 8. All right. Up next at number 7 is going to be Midsommar, which was released in 2019, certified fresh at 83% tomato meter score and a 63% audience score. The critics' consensus goes like this: ambitious, impressively crafted, and above all, unsettling. Midsommar further proves writer-director Ari Aster is a horror auteur to be reckoned with. Yeah, and I think some of those things in that consensus are correct. I would agree with that personally. I think it's crafted well. It is ambitious in some ways. It's definitely unsettling in a lot of ways too. I do think some of the cast is not that good though. There's some cast members that are definitely good in this movie, but some of them, definitely fall flat for me, and it just looks like awkward and just kind of inexperienced. It almost seems like some of the interactions between the characters kind of seem like something you would see in like theater school in New York. They almost seem like they're just fresh out of it. Like some of the interactions between college, you're like, this is not really how college people interact with each other. It just seems very unnatural, some of the things that they say and whatnot. So those are definitely some of the holes with the movie. I will say too, like with this movie, if you're like me, familiar with like weird cult shit, it's kind of predictable. So was I surprised, shocked by some of the things that happened in this movie? No, I wasn't. I do think they were pulled off well on screen and shot well, and some of the stuff was acted well. But, you know, there's some things like when they jump off the cliff, like the stuff at the end, I was just like, okay, yeah, I was totally expecting weird shit. Like we got weird vibes from the very, very beginning. I will say, if you have not seen this movie yet, make sure you are very caffeinated for this movie because, you know, there's some moments that are supposed to be like very slow and artsy. I mean, this movie's, I don't remember exactly, but like 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I get it. There's a reason it's supposed to be like this artsy, slow burn that has all these little like Easter eggs to notice that like intertwine into the story later. You know, it's a good movie. I think it's done well. I personally would have this movie closer to the back half of this list because, like I said, when I think about rankings or I think about lists like this, I just think about, okay, which movies, for one, have more rewatchability for me, and also which movies do I have the most fun with? And Midsommar is definitely one of the movies on this list I have the least fun with. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie by any means. And I think also something just to mention about this movie is obviously this is a horror list. This movie, the first half of the movie, of course, it's open to interpretation, whether you think it is horror or not, because of all the kind of underlying things going on. But in a traditional horror sense, basically the first hour of this movie is not a horror movie. Of course, like the second half of the movie definitely is and is very sinister and gets cranked up a lot. But that's just something kind of to mention. But yeah, Midsommar, like I said, I'd have it closer to the back half of this list for me. So I would disagree with number 7, but there you go. Yeah, Midsommar coming in at number 7. So up next at number 6 is going to be The Blair Witch Project from 1999, certified fresh at 86% tomato meter score, 57% audience score. The critics' consensus for The Blair Witch Project, the original, goes like this: full of creepy campfire scares, mock doc, The Blair Witch Project keeps audiences in the dark about its titular villain, proving once more that imagination can be as scary as anything on screen. Yeah, I totally agree with that. This movie, I mean, this is like the found footage movie. When I think about found footage, when I think about like the best of the best, when I think about the OG found footage movies that are genuinely scary for me, especially just, that's probably partially because of like my age. This movie came out at like a perfect time for me when I was doing a ton of camping. I know, The Blair Witch Project, is this a summer horror movie? You could say no, but for me, I put this on the list because this movie reminds me of camping in the summer. Is it like, you know, are they at the beach? Are they, you know, like out in the sun all the time or anything like that? No, definitely not. But this movie fits on this list because of that reason. But like I said, 1999, I was just doing a shit ton of camping at that time, and I was scared to death after this movie came out. Very similar to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where some people thought it was genuinely real. For the Blair Witch Project, they created like this website and had like the real actors' names on there, and very much made it like these people are missing. These people are dead. I mean, rumor has it, one of the moms or parents of one of the people, the actors in the movie, actually got a letter from like a distant relative saying, I'm sorry that they died. But yeah, I mean, if you were a young teenager in 1999, you thought this shit was real. I think the ending is pulled off really well. The Blair Witch Project, it's very divisive. Like some people, it's definitely one of those movies where I remember when it came out, there were people who were like, this is the worst movie I've ever seen. Dumb, not scary. But for me, I was like, dude, now every time I go camping, I'm checking outside my tent to see if there's some weird rock sculptures or some other shit going on, because I'm scared, genuinely scared. But yeah, legendary movie. Do I have a problem with The Blair Witch Project being number 6? No, I don't. But yeah, there you go. The original, The Blair Witch Project, coming in at number 6. All right, now moving into the top 5. Up next at number 5 is going to be Fear Street Part 2, 1978, which came out in 2021. Certified fresh, 87%. The tomato meter score, 81% audience score. So that's pretty damn high. I mean, that's almost 30% higher in the audience score than the Blair Witch Project. The critics' consensus goes like this: a smart and subversive twist on slasher horror. Fear Street Part 2, 1978, shows that summer camp has never been scarier, thanks to a stellar performances from Sadie Sink, Emily Rudd, and Ryan Simpkins. I mean, never been scarier. I wouldn't go that far. Yeah, the kills are solid in this movie, and it's surprisingly gory for a movie that feels very young. We'll get to that more in just a second. This movie actually has one of those audience consensus too, which says, with great acting, interesting ideas, and strong shades of Friday the 13th, this Fear Street follow-up actually improves on the original. This is my favorite in the trilogy of movies, the Fear Street ones, just because, I mean, it's probably because it's like summer camp, slasher, bloody. I enjoy that kind of thing, obviously. I've already talked about that a lot, but to talk about the first critic consensus again, I mean, never been scarier. I don't think this movie's scary at all. I mean, there's some people I can see who would definitely find this scary, especially if you're younger. I can get that aspect of it. Both of those kind of talk about, in a way, like how good the acting is. I do think there's some good acting in this movie. It's not great though. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. Yeah, it has some interesting ideas to it, definitely. I like the whole aspect of the two different towns kind of fighting between each other and this underlying like dark past that they have. And then we do also at the end of this movie get some of that, like a little glimpse into that even further past to these towns. There's a lot of stuff here though that feels very much just like taken from Stranger Things and piggybacking off of the popularity of Stranger Things, which I get it, like some movies that I talked about earlier that I love, like The Burning, piggybacking off of other movies, of course, but this movie feels a little bit too obvious in that way, in some ways. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those where it's kind of like loud, the sound effects are loud, it feels very young. Fear Street Part 2 is a good time though. Definitely have a good time with it. Would I have it number 5 on this list above movies like The Blair Witch Project, The Burning, The Lost Boys? No, I wouldn't. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie. I enjoy it, but I would have it further back on the list. So I would disagree with number 5 for Fear Street, but I get it. 87%, that's pretty damn high for critics, but hey, you know, but there you go. Number 5, Fear Street Part 2, 1978. All right, coming up next at number 4 is going to be Tremors from 1990. Certified fresh at 88% on the tomato meter, 75% audience score. The critics' consensus for Tremors goes a little something like this. An affectionate throwback to 1950s creature features, Tremors reinvigorates its genre tropes with a finely balanced combination of horror and humor. Definitely agree with that. So Tremors is one of the movies on this list, without a doubt, probably the movie on this list that gives me the most nostalgia. This is a movie that bombed at the box office when it came out in theaters, but picked up and just skyrocketed on VHS. And I mean, I was a part of that audience without a doubt. I remember my brother and I, John, watching Tremors, the original, over and over and over all the time. My grandpa had the VHS and we were popping that shit in left and right. Such a good time with this movie. And I think one of the biggest reasons this movie had so much rewatchability for us is kind of like what they mentioned. It's like a good combination of, it's not just horror, it's not just kills, it's horror, but it's also humor. There's like the people in the town who are fun. The interactions between everybody is, you know, really, really fun. Val and Earl, they play so well off of each other, in my opinion. And I always appreciate, especially looking back now. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't really care. But looking back, like how much effort they put into the practical effects in this movie, I appreciate the hell out of it. I mean, I just remember as a kid imagining myself like being chased by these graboids and trying to hide and, you know, get up onto things. You know, if I was in my car, I imagined that they were outside of the car, in my parents' car, of course. But as a kid, like this movie felt so unique and interesting and felt like nothing I had seen before up to that point. I also think the ending to this movie is fun. It's a great time. It's an ending I'll never forget. Seeing that thing fly off, boom, splatter. Just kind of like an epic ending that you remember as a kid. So much nostalgia for Tremors for me, the original. Do I have a problem with this movie being number 4? I mean, of course, there's a lot of people who would have this movie way farther back if they don't have the nostalgia, but it's just a damn good time. It's such a great mix of horror, kills, and also just fun. So there you go. Tremors at number 4. All right, now we are moving into the top 3. Coming in at number 3 is going to be The Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. Certified fresh at 89% tomato meter score, 82% audience score. The critics' consensus for the OG TCM goes like this. Thanks to a smart script and documentary-style camera work, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre achieves start-to-finish suspense, making it a classic in low-budget exploitation cinema. So obviously, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a classic, created so many things in the genre that we've seen for so many years. A movie that was made for such a small budget. They didn't even have enough money to make extra costumes for Leatherface. So he just ended up smelling like complete ass the entire time that they filmed the movie. So like with the rotting meat and the smell of Leatherface, people were genuinely puking on the set of this movie, which made it even more real in so many ways. And of course, the other layer of this being like, oh, did this really happen? With the opening prologue, making you feel like this is kind of a documentary in a sense. Just crazy, you know what I mean? But I will say, the rewatchability of the original has been going up for me, but it's not super high. It's not a movie that I just genuinely have fun with. It's a very unsettling movie, of course. So it's not a movie I'm gonna pop on all the time. The remake, however, I would put on more often than this movie. I rank the remake higher than this movie just because I have more fun with it. I think our final girl in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Sally, she's kind of she just survives to the end. Yeah, she's resilient, of course, like without a doubt, but she's not one of the better final girls in the genre by any means. She's one of the most iconic, but not one of the best in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, Leatherface, iconic. The look of Leatherface, incredible. Of course, Kirk's death, the first kill of the movie, the first time we get to see Leatherface, that is like a holy shit moment that blows your mind. Very unsettling, the way like the characters are clearly treated like cattle. Kirk bashed over the head, seizing, carried away, the metal door slam. I mean, it's crazy. Do I have a problem with this movie being number 3? No, of course not. But would I personally have the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre as my number 3? Probably not. But like I said, this list is very strong. So even if this movie is, I don't know, number 6 or number 7, that doesn't mean it's not a great movie. But there you go. Number 3, the original The Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. Okay, now we are moving into the top 2. So up next at number 2 is going to be X from 2022. Certified fresh at 94% on the tomato meter score, 76% audience score. The critics' consensus for X goes like this. A fresh spin on the classic slasher formula. X marks the spot where Ty West gets resoundingly back to his horror roots. This one also had an audience consensus, which says X isn't every horror fan's idea of a good time, but it's often unique and never boring. I mean, I would agree that, it's not every horror fan's idea of a good time. It's not one of those horror movies that's going to just like spread across the genre. Everybody from every enjoyment in the genre is going to come together and watch this movie. No, it's a slasher in every way. But I love this movie. One of my favorite slasher movies to come out in years and years and years and years. I remember watching this movie. It was like me and like 2 other people in the theater. And I left and I was like, why are there not more people here? That movie was fun. The cast was amazing. The kills were great. The underlying themes in this movie are crazy. Just the depth to the story, of course, with like aging. Of course, in this movie, you've got Mia Goth playing both the young and the old character. What she does in this movie is incredible. And like I mentioned a second ago, just the cast in general in this movie is one of my favorite casts probably ever in any slasher movie I've ever seen. It's a cast you definitely root for in so many different ways. So when some of them do get killed, you're like, damn, that kind of sucks. It kind of like hits you in a way. Even if some of the characters, maybe in their personal life or whatever, are doing some things that are like kind of shady, you still kind of see where they're coming from. You see their side of things. And each character is kind of like hurting or has something going on in a different way, in a sense, and is trying to achieve their dreams. And the kills, there's so many kills in this movie where you're like, oh my God, like that just happened. Like they shock you. They happen so sudden. It's not like these kills where you can see them coming from a mile away. I mean, there's a shotgun kill in this movie that shocks you. You're like, actually, there's 2 shotgun kills in this movie that you're like, holy shit, that just happened. I also think the end of this movie is incredible. Just capped off with like that sheriff who's like, they look at the camera and he's like, I wonder what's on that camera. And he's like, I bet you it's some fucked up horror movie. Love that line. For a movie that's not really all that meta, to have that type of a moment at the end was fun to kind of cap things off. But yeah, X is incredible. If you've never seen it, highly recommend it. Do I have a problem with X being number 2 on this list? No, I don't have a problem with it at all. I think X for me would be top 3 on this list without a doubt. So yeah, having X as number 2, no problem with that at all. So there you go. X coming in at number 2. All right, and of course, coming in at number 1 by no surprise is going to be Jaws from 1975, certified fresh at 97% on the tomato meter score and a 90% audience score. The critics' consensus for Jaws goes like this: compelling, well-crafted storytelling and a judicious sense of terror ensures Steven Spielberg's Jaws has remained a benchmark in the art of delivering modern blockbuster thrills. And because Jaws is number 1, we got to read some reviews, right? So it's going to be fresh. They gave it a 3.5 out of 4. They said Spielberg had paced the film beautifully so that one is always on edge, tensed for those scary moments that turn out to be false alarms, and left somehow totally unprepared for the real shocks. Totally agree with that. Definitely catch you off guard constantly, which is the pacing and the way the movie's shot with the certain musical cues for certain things. Yeah, oh yeah. All right, another critic review. They actually had the balls to say that Jaws was rotten. They said, it is a coarse-grained and exploitive work which depends on excess for its impact. Ashore, it's a bore, awkwardly staged and lumpily written. I would disagree with that. I mean, of course, the majority of people would disagree with that. Jaws is, an epic movie, one of the greatest blockbuster movies ever made. That's kind of a consensus. Does that mean you can't hate the movie? No, by any means. I don't know if this person hated it, but I think specifically what they said was wrong, in my opinion. Does this movie depend on excess for its impact? No. I mean, yes, this movie is big. It's a blockbuster with lots of extras and just big things happening, but it's not like the goriest movie you're ever going to see. It was probably very gory in the 70s, of course, but I mean, you don't see the shark very much. There's not excess in that regard with like the monster. They said it's ashore, it's pretty boring. I think that's one of the biggest things that sets Jaws apart from a lot of movies in the genre, is the fact that the acting and how they build each character, into being like a real person when you're on shore, essentially. So just the acting and the characters that are not, when we're not in the water, are so interesting. I think that's what sets Jaws apart from just being a movie where a shark is killing people. You know what I mean? So, and lumpily written, I mean, the dialogue in this movie, a lot of it is incredible. Of course, some of the interactions that we see, the storytelling from some of the characters, the way that some of the characters are written to kind of fine tune their unique personalities is so well done. So, I mean, I would definitely disagree with that. Next critic said, they said it was fresh, 4 out of 4. They said Jaws is a sensationally effective action picture, a scary thriller that works all the better because it's populated with characters that have been developed into human beings we get to know and care about. Exactly. See, that's exactly what I was saying. So I agree with that. This next critic also had the guts to say it was rotten. They said riveting, obvious special effects, marginal acting by Robert Shaw, and an Academy performance by the shark, if you like animal acts. I mean, you barely see the shark in this movie, so that's just a weird comment to see. Yeah, I mean, I still think the shark is fun and good, and it doesn't look that bad. I mean, yeah, there's some moments here where it's a little bit iffy, but even watching it in like full UHD in 2024 still looks pretty good, in my opinion. Marginal acting by Robert Shaw as Quint, I would disagree. I mean, I think his character brings you in, and I think he plays that role really, really well. very, of course, crucial role in the movie. And I mean, clearly, like, most people would agree that he did a damn good job. Is he like the greatest actor ever? No, but still. They said rivetingly obvious special effects. Like I said, a lot of the special effects you barely even see in this movie. So are they obvious? I mean, yeah, I mean, when the guy is scuba diving down and sees the head, that looks pretty fake. Even the other day, I was watching this movie and I was watching it with my mom a little bit because I wanted to put it on with her, especially because she is the one who always tells me a lot of stories about Jaws as a kid. And even her, when she saw that head scene again, she was like, oh, that looks so fake. So, I mean, yeah, I get it. But, I mean, this is the summer blockbuster. So having Jaws #1 on the list, not surprising at all. Of course, no problem with that whatsoever. Love this movie. It's a classic. I mean, it's one of those movies. It's kind of like Halloween 1978. You just ask people who were around the age to watch this movie in the 70s, and they'll tell you a story about. Everyone has a story about Jaws. Everybody, dude. I talked to so many people about this movie who are like of that generation. I mean, this is a movie, one of those movies that like defined an era for decades to come about one certain thing. You know, a movie is a classic when they change something. The ocean, the beach, swimming, they change it forever, essentially. And that's what Jaws did, without a doubt. So, I mean, like I said, a classic. #1 on the list, no surprise. No problem with that whatsoever. But yeah, there you go. Jaws coming in at #1 on how Rotten Tomatoes ranks these 15 summer horror movies. So thanks so much, everybody, for watching kind of my thoughts on how Rotten Tomatoes ranks these 15 summer horror movies. If you want to see me do a part 2 and add some more summer horror movies to a list like this, let me know down in the comments down below. Let me know kind of what your favorite movies are on this list, how you would rank this list personally, because I know a lot of you would have this list all over the place. Check out one of these videos next to me if you want some more content from me right now, but make sure you subscribe to not miss any videos in the future. But I'll talk to you all on the next one.